Hello, my name is Ed Brown, Managing Director at the American Academy of Advanced Thinking, and your host for Insights in Education. Today I'll be speaking with LinkedIn specialist Mike Shelah. Today we'll be discussing how to become a top thought leader in education through LinkedIn. Just give you some information about Mike. In 2011, Mike began sharing his insights and perspectives on LinkedIn with audiences throughout Maryland. In 2015, he founded Mike Shelah Consulting to work directly with companies and sales professionals nationwide, helping them find more customers and find them fast on LinkedIn. Mike uses experience to evangelize the value of LinkedIn and assist them in the job market, wanting to find them the dream job and put them at the top of the applicant list. Thank you, Mike, for being a guest on Insights in Education.
Thanks for having me on, Ed. This is going to be fun.
I think so. I want to get right into it. Now, how did you discover LinkedIn as a platform for connecting and building communities?
Almost completely by accident. I've been in sales now since 1996, and I got into technology sales in 1999. And that was my first exposure to business-to-business selling. When I first began in the industry, I did a lot of traditional cold calling. I would get a Hoover's list. Maybe some of your audience remembers the old Hoover's list. And I could actually focus them on a particular business district or region, and I would just smile and dial. I could make 100 phone calls in a day. I could set 3 or 4 appointments, and I'd do that a couple times a week, and I'd have enough meetings to go forth and be successful. And I would say that around 2008, 2009, that model almost came to a complete halt as far as its effectiveness, where I used to be able to make 100 calls and set 1 or 2 or 3 appointments. Now I could make 200, 300, 400 calls and not set any. And a friend of mine had introduced me to LinkedIn, and like a lot of people, I created a profile, but I never did anything with it until I started doing some research online, and it seemed like every time that I was looking for a decision maker at a company, I was directed to their LinkedIn profile, and I began to develop my profile. I began to cultivate mine. I began to grow my network base. And that's really been the core to my success as a sales professional, and many of my coworkers and fellow networkers took notice of that. I would go to networking events, and they would mention somebody that they wanted to meet, and I would say, hey, I know that guy. I'll introduce you on LinkedIn. And it got to the point where people were saying, well, how do you do that? How are you connecting people? And I thought to myself, this is an opportunity for me to earn a living doing something that I really do, and that's why I founded Mike Shelah Consulting.
Okay. And I understand that you also are a manager in the education space. What challenges, if any, have you found that educators experience in understanding the power of LinkedIn?
I think, like most people, when the education community looks at LinkedIn, they're not giving it the proper attention. And I don't want people to think that LinkedIn is the only tool, but it is an important tool. And I've had the good fortune to start working with several higher education organizations. I've done some training with Johns Hopkins. I've done training at Towson University, also at UMBC, Stevenson University. And so I think the schools are starting to get it now. They're starting to buy into, we need to educate our students, because this is not a quick fix. But if you start it early enough, it can really plant the seeds of success for when you do need to cultivate.
Let me do a deeper dive in that, because you make a great point. What trends have you noticed that educators and institutions are starting to see the value of LinkedIn? Have you noticed or determined what that thing is?
Well, I'm starting to see more of, they're not just putting an emphasis on the resume. I did a presentation at Towson University a couple weeks ago, and one of the students asked me, he said, do you do resume support for people as well? And I said, no, I don't actually. And I said, I think resumes are really overblown to their value. When you look at a resume, yes, it needs to be typographically clean. It needs to be grammatically accurate. beyond that, the resume is not going to get you a job. And I think schools are starting to realize that as you've indicated, by using a platform like LinkedIn to position yourself as a thought leader, to generate content and conversations and interest, that's where the job market really lies. I said in several interviews recently, over 70% of jobs that are available never get publicly advertised. They never make it to Indeed or Monster or even the Jobs tab on LinkedIn.
Right.
By the time they get to those platforms, they've been picked over.
And would you say that because there's if you want to call a sub-market, that of course LinkedIn is being seen as a popular venue for individuals to get ahead of the steam in that game. From that vantage point, are educators adopting a more market-centric perspective, or are they slowly coming out of the idea that education is still the last bastion of this sense that, like church and other places that, once upon a time you didn't talk against, or there was no marketing attachment to it? Are they coming out of that doldrum of saying that we have to market ourselves, or we have to present our students in ways like a product, for lack of a better term, like anyone else has to compete in the marketplace?
Most colleges that I've engaged recently are recognizing that students are not just looking at, does your degree have a certain clout that comes with it? What they're looking at is, okay, how many students of yours on graduation day have a job lined up? What's their hireability 3 months, 6 months, 12 months post-graduation? And for the longest time, school didn't think about that. I mentioned Johns Hopkins. I've done extensive work with Johns Hopkins, and a lot of their students are like, well, I go to Johns Hopkins, of course I'm going to get a job. Well, here's the thing. Hopkins is a great institution, but there are lots of other great institutions. I always joke with people that I went to UMBC before it was one of the premier technology schools in the country. Right. I graduated from UMBC in 1995 when it was really a glorified commuter school. And when I tell people that I graduated from UMBC, they're like, oh, really? And first response is, don't be impressed.
Right. Okay.
So that sort of notoriety can rise and fall. The schools are now seeing we have to show that our degree translates to a job, because going to college is expensive, and students take significant loans to make it through that process, and they need to know that they have a methodology to pay those loans off when they graduate.
Now, like, you have a unique background. I'm going to play the slightly devil's advocate here, because a person with a sales background can say, well, go on LinkedIn and you can be persuasive, and when the clients call you, you have a way, if you will, of dealing with people because you have that knack. What tips from your sales background would you suggest helps educators position themselves to become top thought leaders on LinkedIn?
Wow, Ed, you just pulled out the golden nugget there, didn't you? Because that is, it is something people ask me almost from word one. So when I speak in front of an audience, I say, look, I'm not an expert. I'm not a guru. I'm not a ninja. I'm not any of these things. And what people need to embrace is, there's a great book by a gentleman named Daniel H. Pink. He's in Washington, D.C. I believe he writes for either the Times or Newsweek or one of those premier publications. He wrote a book called To Sell is Human. And when you look at it statistically, the business world, I believe a little over 10% of jobs are in the traditional sales, like an account executive or however you want to describe, business development, sales role. The other 90% need to sell. They just don't realize it. Because sales at its core is identifying a problem, listening to that problem, and proposing a solution that solves the problem. And that comes with good listening skills. That comes with your ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes. That comes with your ability to create a solution that wins for both. Everybody's heard the term win-win scenario.
Right.
And that's been beaten to death. It doesn't hold the original meaning. Dr. Stephen Covey, the gentleman that wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, coined the term win-win. And what he meant by that is that literally, I have something that I want, you have something that you want. And when we bring those two things together, we create a third experience that neither of us had thought of before. And that is the culmination of win-win. So many times the idea of win-win really actually ends up being win-lose or lose-win or lose-lose, where people are making concessions and they feel like they're giving things up to get what they want. No, when you really create a win-win mentality, you are taking the other person's ideas and your ideas, and they are becoming interdependent. You're recognizing how valuable they are to each other to create the new solution that benefits both of you.
Now, I can see that being challenging for educators who all they want to do is go into the classroom, whether at the high school level or the college level, and just teach. Now, you're talking about needing to be salespeople or thinking a different perspective. How do you transition from the idea of, oh, I'm not a salesperson, I hate sales, to a, as you described, a win-win situation by which there's a third component of the sales process that makes us better by us collaborating? How do you, if you had to give one or two tips, how do you get someone mentally into that? Realize we all salespeople on some level, but don't see it as sales. See it as an opportunity to facilitate a bigger process or a beneficial process for both parties as well as the parties that we're trying to serve.
That's really where it begins. It's that you as a student, you want a job. So you're going to college supposedly because you chose a major that you love. And we'll go with that supposition for a moment, that your major is something that you are passionate about and that you enjoy, and you want to do a job that you enjoy. The way that you get the job opportunities is by presenting your unique value. And I give this example a lot. You may have heard this before, but let's say that you really want to work for XYZ Engineering. So on LinkedIn, you can follow XYZ Engineering. You can also follow their top competitor, who is ABC Engineering. And the value to you is that both organizations will frequently post press releases because everybody likes to tell you how wonderful they are, right?
Right.
So you follow the press releases, and you notice that ABC Engineering just put out a massive update for something that they're going to do that's going to revolutionize the industry. You then take that knowledge, go to XYZ Engineering and say to the recruiting manager or the hiring manager, I just saw that ABC Engineering posted this revolutionary idea for the industry. I have some thoughts on how we could not only implement that at your company, but make it even better than what ABC had imagined. When would you like to talk about that? Now, is that selling?
It's consultative selling. Selling, obviously, I want to take that, express more consultative. You actually have found a problem, and you're solving a problem. Of course, the individual who hears that, all things being fair and equal, will say, of course I want to communicate with you because you have a solution to my problem.
Yes. So to every person listening to this, to every man and woman listening to this that doesn't consider them a salesperson, is what I just did selling. Would they think of it that way?
Probably not.
But it absolutely is. It's about taking a unique perspective to a problem and coming up with a solution to that problem. Now, it just so happens that your solution also greatly benefits you because that person that's going to talk to you, they're going to offer you a job.
Okay. So let's go back because I'm thinking, when you say that, I'm thinking about death of a salesman. When did again, this historical significance, I guess, to bring it up to date.
Willie Loman.
Yeah, exactly. When did the sales position or sales industry become this tawdry, I'm not a salesperson? Can you isolate or determine when that actually took place?
I think that it started in the late 80s when you look at Michael Douglas's portrayal of Gordon Gekko.
Uh-huh.
And greed is good. That personified what the world thought of salespeople, that they lie to you, that they manipulate you. Unfortunately, there is a significant amount of that left in the sales world, which makes it hard for good salespeople to get out there and do their job. And I always refer to a film that's regarded as a cult classic now, Glengarry Glen Ross, where Alec Baldwin gives his infamous speech about ABC, always be closing.
Right.
And I have said that the concept of ABC, always be closing, has done more damage to the sales profession than just about every other cliche that has come out of the industry. Because that's not what it's about. One of my favorite things about the new thought leaders in sales is that sales really is about qualifying, meaning there are 1,000 people within a stone's throw of you that are potential clients, but only about 100 of them are probably qualified to be clients. And that's the first thing that a lot of people miss. And it's the same thing with the job market. There are thousands of jobs out there right now that are available, but maybe only 100 of them are good for you.
Right.
And you have to take that position. You have to get out of the desperation mode, the dog under the buffet table mode.
Okay.
And you have to turn it around to, I'm valuable. I have unique ideas, and those unique ideas will benefit this company. When you can articulate that to a potential hiring manager, it makes all the difference in the world. I tell this story that the last technology company I worked for, on my interview, I'm sitting in the conference room, and my soon-to-be sales manager is sitting across from me on the table. And I've got my suit on, and she's got her business suit on, and she picks up my resume and kind of taps it on the table and says, "Did you bring a copy of your resume today?" And I looked at her, and I said, "No, I did not." And she stared at me like I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "You didn't bring your resume." And I said, "No, I did that intentionally." She said, "You intentionally didn't bring your resume to the interview." I said, "Here's the thing. If you have any questions about any part of my resume, I am happy to answer them. However, I've been in this industry a long time. I suspect that you have a grasp of my capabilities. What I'd really like to find out today is, are you and I on the same page? Do we believe in the same things? Do we care about the same things? Because if we do, then we're going to be tremendously successful together. But if we don't, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job or how good I am at my job, we're not going to be successful. We're going to be miserable. And I spent the next hour and a half talking to her from that perspective. And when we were done, I stood up and said, "I feel good about this relationship. How do you feel?" And she said, "I feel good about it too." And 2 weeks later, I had a job offer.
Wow. Now, that's powerful. How did you get to that point where you had that sense of, I would say, internal power of self-confidence? That's something that you would have to be here for a long time or have different kind of experiences to have that kind of heft. What, in your experience, brought you to that sense of you can have that partnership conversation as opposed to, well, I'm here for a job. Yeah, of course I have an extra resume. Yes, I'll be. How did you get to that point, to the point that you articulate yourself so well in that instance?
I chose to be that way because the other way was not effective. I've had plenty of people reach out to me on LinkedIn. Recruiters contact me all the time saying, hey, I've got a great job opportunity. And after talking to them for 2 minutes, I'm like, you didn't even read my profile, did you? You saw 2 or 3 buzzwords that caught your attention, and you just ran with it. And that's the thing. You are valuable as an individual. Your time is valuable. Your talents are valuable. And you have every right in the world to feel that way about yourself. And I don't mean that in an arrogant manner, but I've had recruiters say to me, well, I need you to send me a copy of your resume by 6 o'clock tonight. Why? Well, the company that wants to hire you needs to see it. I'm like, they can look at my LinkedIn profile. Well, they need a copy of your resume. I tell you what, we get to the point where they're going to offer me the job, I'll be glad to send you a copy so that they can put it in my folder and file it away in HR.
Wow. And it's
but that's changing the conversation. That's taking it to a place of confidence.
Right.
And you as an individual just have to say, I can play by these rules and not succeed, or I can let people know that I am valuable, and the ones that respect that are the ones that I want to work with.
And that's powerful, because I'm thinking that's the mindset of a thought leader. Because when you have ideas and you have solutions, you come to the table with a sense of, not, as you say, braggadociously, I know it all, or
I'm here to help.
I'm here to help. So when you think about it from that vantage point, from a thought leader perspective, when it comes to educators, what could being a thought leader do to offset the challenge of education? For example, a lot of times you hear they're educated dealing with politics, parental frustrations, economics, so on and so forth. What does thought leader do for that sense of power you just articulated for the average educator?
I think as much as anything else, being a thought leader gives you credibility, and when you have credibility, you earn freedom and flexibility. And what I mean by that is, we all have heard coach speak, right? Politicians do it all the time. You watch 30 minutes of the president, and I don't care which president, whether it's our current POTUS or previous presidents. Mm-hmm. Plug any one of them in. You listen for 30 minutes and go, I got absolutely nothing out of that. There's no value. It's all cliches and coach speak. You know, you ever watch the press conference after the football game?
Right.
They didn't get anything out of that. They
Right.
didn't say anything of meaning, of merit. But when you can articulate a point, and here's the key factor. This is one of the other things that most people miss, is that when they share an opinion, they fall prey to sharing an attack. This is not about saying the other side is wrong. That's one of my fundamental issues with our political system as it stands. Is so many times the politicians attack one another. Well, you know what? I don't care why you think the opponent is a bad politician. I want you to tell me how you're going to make things better. What is your plan to make things better? Tell me that, because that's something that I can wrap my head around. That's something that I can gravitate towards. You know, people that point out problems, the world's filled with them. The people that suggest solutions are the ones that are thought leaders. Suggest solutions, even if it's a bad one.
Right.
Let the world tell you that, and then come back with, okay, I revised it. Here's my new one. Here's my next idea.
Right, right. So instead of talking about the politics, the machinations of education and parental frustrations, and we don't make enough money as educators, if you have a thought leadership perspective or a strategy or idea of, as you said, I'm empowered, I have value, this is the problems I see, here's what I can do to solve them, and I'll write about it, I'll have a podcast about them, I'll have a video about them, and now I've become a thought leader, and therefore those challenges that I once thought were challenges are no longer something I have to deal with, or I can deal with them on my terms. Would you say thought leadership does that? It gives you the power to control life on your terms or make your own decisions on your terms?
I think you've touched upon an excellent point there, Ed. We all want to be happy, right?
Right.
You made a quick mention of they don't pay me enough for this. Show me a person on this planet that feels like they are adequately compensated.
You're right.
It's a small minority, isn't it?
Well,
because
you think about most people say they don't.
Regardless of how much money you make, you always feel like it's not enough. So it's not about that aspect. It's about framing the perspective of the situation I'm in right this moment. What can I do to elevate that?
And that's key. I'm thinking, as you say that, we've been talking about the power of thought leadership for educators. And sometimes it's not really about me, it's about the students. From your vantage point, how does becoming a thought leader on LinkedIn help trickle down to students if the educators, in fact, embrace this ideology?
My favorite thing about LinkedIn is your ability to speak to your audience. For example, you write a blog on the LinkedIn platform, every single connection you have on LinkedIn is notified that you published that blog. LinkedIn also has groups that you can join. You can join groups based on geography, based on industry, based on a hobby or an interest that you have, alumni associations. Every group has as few as a handful of members to millions of members. You could share your blog into that group, and now you've expanded your reach from the 400 or 500, 600 connections you have on LinkedIn to literally millions of people because they're getting notified because they're members of that group that this content now exists. And then you get engagement. That's my favorite. Like when my friends post or they like or they share my content, I'm grateful. But what really gets me fired up is when somebody that I've never met before reads my post and then shares it to their network because they said, this is so valuable. I have no idea who this guy is, but I read this article and it resonated with me. That's thought leadership.
Okay. And so I guess the takeaway would be when educators embrace thought leadership and become thought leaders themselves, it trickles down to students in ways that the student becomes, by association, I want to be a thought leader too. I can do what Mr. and Mrs. Smith say that I can do because I see them, in this case, I see them on LinkedIn, I see them on Facebook, I see them on other social media, and therefore they seem to be people that other people respect. So I want to be respected that way. So is it an association breeds other opportunities type effect based on being a thought leader on LinkedIn?
Leadership by action. You're doing the right things the right way for the right reasons, and people are going to gravitate towards that.
And from that vantage point, what mistakes or missteps are students making on LinkedIn that educators could correct? Obviously, if you're a student, you're still learning. Sometimes we give them more power of insight and introspection than they actually have. What can educators do to say, well, if you do this or you do that, maybe you can, tweak that and modify that to actually make your message clearer? Is that something that educators should be doing? And if so, how could they do more of that?
Yeah, I would love to see more educators take that step. My first piece of advice is you want to develop your LinkedIn profile for the job that you want, not necessarily the job that you have. And particularly for college students, so many of them, when you look at their profile, it says student, fill in the blank university. Mm-hmm. Well, nobody hires students. But that student is going to that school for a specific degree. They're going there to become an architect, to become an engineer, to become an accountant, to become a business manager. So craft your headline because it's the first thing people see. They see your photo and they see your headline. Craft that headline to the job that you want, to attract the people that you want. I give this example all the time. You can look at a salesperson's profile and it tells you how many times they've exceeded quota and how many times they've been President's Club and all these other accolades. Well, that's great, but how many of your clients care that you exceeded quota?
Right.
None of them. Now, if you're looking for a job, maybe you want that content in there because that might impress a recruiter or a hiring manager. But think about, who are you trying to attract? Who do you want to come and look at your profile, and why? And then when you talk about marrying that to being a thought leader, what content are you posting and why? Before every post, think to yourself, what do I hope the result of this post is? Are you just sharing valuable information? Because that's fine.
Right.
Do you want interaction with your audience? Do you want to grow your audience? Are you looking for ideas because maybe you haven't fully baked an idea? LinkedIn's great for that. I call the groups platform on LinkedIn the global mastermind, because if you're stuck on something, you can go to a group focused on that industry. There will be subject matter experts in that industry. You can ask a question, and you will get 20 or 30 or 40 comments from people that are legitimate experts in that field to help you grow and expand upon your problem so that you can solve it.
Right. I like what you said earlier about your approach to interviews. And I think, to me, that's the biggest thing that thought leadership does. It gives the individual an opportunity to say, hey, I look at this industry. Here are the 1, 2, 3 problems I see facing it now and in the future. Based on my research and my analysis, I think these things right here will be the solution. I think that when you have that thought leadership mentality, it breeds that confidence you talked about earlier. And I believe that if more students and educators became stronger in their resolve to say, I'm, as you said, valuable, I have insight, I've done my research, I've done my homework, I'm not begging for a job, I'm asking for an opportunity. I think that they come with their approach, that the vista of opportunities open up, because you no longer are coming as a mendicant, a beggar. You're coming as a person who says, I have value, and let's share in this process. And I think from the vantage point of imagining the avatar for the hiring manager, that person has to say, oh, this is interesting. Most people are groveling. This person is talking to me as if they could not only take or leave the job, but they come in as a partner. And to me, that perhaps balances the inequality that people perceive when they go into a job interview, that I'm not asking for a job, I'm looking for opportunity for the partner. And if I don't like the partner, as you said earlier, I can walk away because this is not a fit for us.
Exactly. And that's a healthy attitude to have. I think one of the things that particularly younger people coming out of college today is they're faced with, oh, there's 1,000 other people applying for this job, and what makes me any better than what makes you any worse?
Right.
You know, that glass is either half empty or half full. It's all depends on your perspective. You are not any worse than anybody else interviewing for that job. So all is up to you is to take the one little thing that makes you different and emphasize that. And again, we're back to sales, aren't we, Ed?
Right.
Because you fill in the blank. You name the industry. I just had a very good conversation with a friend of mine who owns a company here in Maryland, and he had a sales rep that worked for him for 2 years, was a great guy, and he lost him. And he said to me, you know, Mike, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And he said, my industry is becoming so commoditized. Every industry is commoditized.
Right.
It comes down to your ability to connect with that specific client, that specific hiring manager, and really create a bond. They call it building rapport, and that, again, is an overused concept. But one of the things that I love about LinkedIn is I can find out if somebody went to the same college as me, went to the same high school as me. Do they volunteer in their community? Are they active in their community? What matters to them? And sometimes it can be as simple as you walk into somebody's office for an interview and you see they have a picture of a dog.
Right.
You ask them about that dog, you've now identified yourself as a dog person, and they're going to like you. But if you went into that interview, saw the picture of the dog, and said, I really don't like dogs, I'm a cat person, what chance do you have of winning that opportunity? You've just killed it. So what you do is, instead of focusing on the differences, which is you're a dog person, I'm a cat person, you pick something else. And that's what LinkedIn is so great about. It gives you a wealth of information about this person. Yeah, I've gotten tons of meetings just by telling people that I'm from UMBC, that I'm a retriever. I've gotten tons of meetings because they have a mutual connection. Yeah, several years ago, I had a job where the owner had joined the local chamber, and he wanted me to call every member of the chamber. I'm like, this is a waste of time, but okay. So before I called everyone, I looked them up on LinkedIn to see if I knew anybody that they knew. And this one particular gentleman, I noticed that he was connected to a former boss of mine as well as one of my fraternity brothers. So when I called him, I said, hey, Bill, this is Mike from XYZ Company, just joined the Baltimore County Chamber. I took a look at your profile on LinkedIn, and I noticed that you are connected to George and to Brad. They're good friends of mine. How do you know them? Here's my number. Call me back. I got a call back 10 minutes later. And you know what he asked me? How do you know George and Brad?
Okay.
So I explained. I said, I used to work for George. I'm still friendly with him, have a good relationship with him. And I said, and Brad's my fraternity brother. He says, well, as it turns out, George is a business partner of mine, and I rent space from him. And he said, and as for Brad, Brad's my childhood best friend. When do you want to get together and meet?
Wow. That's key.
And that's how you move yourself to the top of the applications list. That's how you move ahead of the 1,000 other people that just graduated from your school and are trying to get that job too.
And that's key. And I think some people are still under the guise that opportunities is a numbers game. So let's use that example you just articulated. The person over Chambers gives you this list. You see 100 people on the list. Man, I got to call all these people. And if you told them what you just told them about going to LinkedIn and do the background, look for connections, say, well, that's 100 people I got to make a connection with. How do you get people excited about the idea of 100 opportunities? Doesn't mean that you got to call 100 people right now, that you can actually create 5 opportunities or connections or networking possibilities, and therefore achieve the things you would have achieved if you had gone through a random list of sorts, and therefore calling people blindly, asking, hey, I'm Ed Brown. I noticed that you're in whatever profession. What problems are you actually having right now that I can help you with to ameliorate? It seems to me that the lazy person who not only doesn't want to do it, but the person who says that I'm used to this making phone calls, not asking questions, making phone calls, and therefore it's a numbers game. How do you get people into that consultative selling again that you articulate? How do you get them in that mindset to the point where each call is a quality call, not a numbers call?
Yeah. Well, I think for salespeople, it's easy because salespeople are tired of calling people, leaving a voicemail, and never getting a response. For sales leadership, it's a little harder because they're like, well, back in my day, you mean 1987, sir? Okay.
Right.
It's changed a little since then. It's about being smart. And as for the job seeker, the soon-to-be college graduate, what I say is create a list of 10 companies that you want to work for. And that criteria is very personal, and it should be. It should be about what would make you feel fulfilled. It could be culture. It could be geography. It could be size of the company. Come up with your reasons for what makes a good company, and then find 10 of them. Now, once you have your 10, then you begin your research. So for every company, you want to find out who their competitor is. And then you want to use the method that I used earlier where company A is who you want to work for, but company B just posted a press release. How can I make that press release work for me?
Right.
Because I promise you, that methodology is much faster and a much more enjoyable process than to float your resume out to as many recruiters and hiring managers and job boards and be flooded with calls for people that did not bother to read or evaluate you. You're just a number because they're smiling and dialing and they're throwing enough spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks.
Right. I like that because what I'm hearing from your perspective, and it's still in the realm of thought leadership, even though we got into recruitment and job seeking, is that when you have developed a heft in a particular vocation or industry/profession, and you have done your homework and your analysis over a period of time, and you do know the problems and you have solutions, you don't have to be all over the place. Just choose the small number, 5 to 10, 15, 20 tops, and then go from there. And therefore, it doesn't seem this arduous, inundated idea of all these people. I got to do all the same thing. Oh my God, I'll be all day. And they're going to say no anyway. It becomes something of small numbers, but deeper dive in depth as opposed to swath. I like that because I think people can buy into that as opposed to the traditional way of doing things.
It's meaningful.
Yes.
It's taking a very mundane and non-meaningful practice, cold calling or mass marketing, and it's making it highly focused. And you've probably read this. You're a well-read man. But everybody that wants to strike out on their own business, they tell you, be laser sharp in your focus.
Right.
Have a very specific niche within your business. When I first started Mike Shelah Consulting, I was very broad, LinkedIn. And then about 6 months ago, I was at an event, and the guy up on stage said, laser focus. And I said, okay, LinkedIn prospecting. And I can still take that a number of directions, but
right.
Saying LinkedIn prospecting is much more focused than just saying LinkedIn. Now, I can talk LinkedIn all day.
Right, right.
But there's a very specific group of people that are probably willing to pay me money because it's LinkedIn prospecting.
Right. I like that because when you said that, what jarred my memory is I was talking about critical thinking this time last year because the data suggested that students coming out of college based on corporate managers didn't have critical thinking skills, decision-making skills, or problem-solving skills. So I said, okay, well, critical thinking skills are something that's going to be big in the future. So I started talking about critical thinking. Then I realized critical thinking for the sake of critical thinking was not going to be something that people could buy it out of. Where are you going to take this critical thinking, Ed? So I said, well, as I did more research and data, I saw that thought leadership was an ideal. Leadership is still a $70 billion industry in corporate America, a year in America, and $130 billion across the world. So thought leadership is always going to be a big thing, but thought leadership was more compelling. So to take somebody from an idea of just critical thinking and not having a place to take them, thought leadership was logical. Okay, so now you have thought leadership. Where do you take them from there? And who's going to take the time if they don't know how to build websites, blogs, podcasts, and videos? Well, LinkedIn became the most ideal one-stop shopping place as I saw it. So now you take critical thinking all the way to becoming a thought leader, and you can do all that on one place, LinkedIn. To me, that was powerful. And I think that from your vantage point, what you do as it relates to your own perspective as a thought leader, you have Xfinity on campus. And I thought that was intriguing when I read your LinkedIn profile about Xfinity on campus. I want to know how did the opportunity come about, and what is Xfinity on campus?
Xfinity on campus is my day job. I work for Comcast, and I represent all of their higher education schools within the Mid-Atlantic market, which is about 55 schools. Okay. And there's a tie into what you're doing and that opportunity? It was a very unique opportunity because I saw the value of my LinkedIn training for college students, and the Xfinity on campus gave me access to all of these schools. Wow. It gave me the reason to be there and to really begin to penetrate. I'll give you a great example. I had a meeting yesterday with a woman who owns an architecture firm in Howard County, Maryland. And she is in desperate need of full-time employees. She wants to hire somebody right out of college that she can really groom and bring up in her company culture. And she said, Mike, there's 2 schools in this country, or in this state, that offer architecture. That's College Park and that's Morgan State. And I said, okay, let me reach out to my contacts and get you moving. So I introduced her to the director of the Career Center at College Park today, and I have a contact at Morgan State, said, Mike, I will have 3 candidates for you to give to your friend on Friday.
Wow.
So that was blending Mike Shelah Consulting and the Xfinity on Campus work that I do for Comcast.
That's huge. And what came, the chicken or the egg? Did that opportunity for Mike Shelah Consulting come about from that experience, or was that pre-Xfinity on Campus?
It was the other way around. Yeah, I already had Mike Shelah Consulting going, and when the Xfinity on Campus opportunity came along, I said, this is too good to pass up, because it puts me exactly where I want to be in front of these students.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Now, I know you are busy, man, and we're going to just wrap up this way. Is there any best way for people to contact you if they want more information on your service on LinkedIn? How can they actually get in contact with you?
Sure. I like to think that I am very Googleable. Once you know how to spell my last name, Shelah, you will find me naturally on LinkedIn at Mike Shelah. You will find me on Twitter and Instagram. My user handle on both of those is at Mike Shelah. You can find me on Facebook. Mike Shelah Consulting is my business page. And, of course, I have my own website, which is MikeShelah.com. And any of your listeners that go to my website, they can get a free 3-page profile review of their LinkedIn profile. So I will actually go through their profile and, based on my top metrics, make recommendations to enhance and improve their LinkedIn profile. That's free of charge. All they have to do is go to my website and sign up for it.
That's huge. That's huge. Chock full of information. Mike Shelah, I appreciate you coming on. Insights in Education. Any final thoughts and notes that you want to leave as a high note for the listeners?
And I'm incredibly grateful for your time today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike, for coming on. I'm going to finally say this is Ed Brown signing off on another episode of Insights in Education, and we will see you in the future. Thank you.